you talked about messaging and helping people to get their messaging right and knowing their personas, their audience, who they're talking to, which is great. How do you then weave in somebody's story? How do you even draw out somebody's story to begin with? So, let's say I'm listening and I'm like, I don't know what my sellable story is. There's so much of me, or it feels like there's nothing.
Oh yeah, no, everybody has a story. Everybody has something. There's a reason you're doing what you're doing. And there's something that motivated you to do that. Whether it was, it's something that you always enjoyed, right? Like I always had a push-pull of, I love nonprofit and philanthropy and charity work. My mom was a social worker, but I also was always drawn to business. And so trying to figure out how I could weave the two together, then, over the last few years, I'm like, oh, actually, if I do marketing and PR for organizations that I'm aligned with, then it helps me get people's message out who need that assistance. But then it also helps make me feel good about what I'm doing. And it's what I'm really passionate about. And so that's part of my story. We could actually do an exercise if you wanted to.
Yeah,
I do a lot of that with people's clients to talk about storytelling. And part of storytelling is making sure, who are you telling the story to? Because the way you tell a journalist might be different than the way you tell a customer versus somebody that you're just trying to inspire, right? But I think one thing that we've seen over the past few years as well is authenticity is really important. So people don't want to just buy product; they're buying you. You are the brand, right? And so if they have faith and trust in you, good, bad, and the ugly, warts and all, sharing our stories and all of the things that that we had to do to get to where we are, and that we're still failing or making mistakes and learning opportunities along the way. All of that is really important for people to feel connected, especially I think you see the millennials and Gen Z, they're always looking for, okay, how is a brand integrating sustainability or something socially conscious or volunteerism into their company narrative. And so they want those stories, right? So there's a lot of ways, because I know you alluded to this, some people don't want to share their story. And I can say it's not nearly as effective if you're not willing to share your story, because you're the thing that makes your brand different than all the other brands out there. An example is a doctor and his wife created a new cleaning product because they have 3 little girls. The mom had taken the daughters out to a public bathroom and to like the mall and by herself. And it was very hard because the facilities were disgusting. And she wishes she had had something to clean with and that she wouldn't have to touch anything. And so they created a product, but they don't want to share their personal story about why they created the product. And they are limiting how they're marketing it to just like, it's to clean up toilets. And it's called pee-pee wipe. Well, that's not very, I don't know, it's kind of that ick factor of like, how about we show it cleaning other things too? How about we show how it's multi-use? Maybe somebody who's going on a camping trip can use it. And even though it's called pee-pee wipe, we know what it means. But let's show some other uses so that people can see and their thought about the product isn't limited, right? And also sharing that story makes it a lot more relatable to parents of like, oh, I get it. Now I see. And but a good example of sharing story would be an organization called Shared Harvest. It's a nonprofit and also a fintech startup that started out because 3 Black women doctors in the United States realized there was a huge connection between student loan debt, especially when you go into things like medical school, being a lawyer, the amount of school, the sheer amount of school, the amount of cost, and then coming out and you might not be able to pay that down very quickly. They saw this connection between the student loan debt and also poor mental health outcomes for people in these positions. They experienced it in their own lives, saw people around them experiencing it. And so what they decided to do was create a platform where volunteers who were professionals could do projects for nonprofits that needed services but couldn't afford them. And then the professional, when they completed the project, would get some of their student debt removed. So they'd get some relief and a stipend to pay off some of that debt. And so just trying to create better outcomes for mental health, for the debt, and then put some good into the world. And the most important part of that, though, is their story of what they experienced going through school and how they saw it affecting their classmates and other professionals in the field, and why they decided to make a difference. And then because they were doctors during the pandemic at the very beginning, they were able to pivot this platform they'd created that already had all of these volunteers and nonprofits into activating into the community and doing culturally competent, community-centered COVID testing, and then now obviously vaccinations and other work. And so they were able to turn this into something really beautiful and snowball their PR from one small story that we got in Girl Talk HQ, a newsletter that was seen by somebody at Forbes. So then Forbes wanted to write about it, and then it exploded, and it was shared widely. And then Amazon had a TV show called Regular Heroes, and they actually shared the organization on season 1, episode 5. And so that really helped. That shows you how sharing your story, being willing to be authentic, and even starting out small can turn into something much larger.
Yeah. It's massively snowballed, didn't it?
Yeah, it did.
From just sharing their story, being in one article, to then ending up in a TV show. It just feels a bit surreal. I guess it's difficult to picture when you're at the start of this journey and you're still trying to figure out what is your message, what is your own story, and how do you pull those pieces together. But they both sounded really simple. I guess if you were to ask people who are listening a couple of questions to get them to draw out their own story, what would you say?
Well, I always want to start with, what's your why? Why are you doing this? Why is this so important that this is the thing that you have to do, right? This is the business you feel like you need to pour your energy into. And then I always want to look at, what are you solving? And so that can sometimes be the why, and sometimes it's something different. And the why often, I think, has that personal narrative weaved in as well, right? Something that happened to you that caused you to want to do this, that caused you to want to put this good into the world, or you found a product that really needs to be out there that is different than something else. You start with the basics. And I can say it's not easy to get necessarily into the Forbes and the Inks and those big publications. And everybody thinks, I'll just get into that automatically. You do have to start, usually, right? Most people, you need to start small. You need to also cut your teeth and get comfortable speaking. Have your talking points written out. A lot of people, when they start doing interviews, they use a lot of ums and ahs and awkward pauses. And it's okay to have some space, and it's okay to pause, and you get better at it over time. And so starting with those smaller publications and podcasts also helps you fine tune so that you're ready when the bigger opportunities happen.
Yeah. Practice and hone your story, I suppose, and your message.
Yeah.
That sounds great. So I guess one of the things that would be really useful is to know, what is one of the biggest mistakes that you see people make when they go to deliver their message or tell their story, or what are they getting wrong with their marketing? That means they're not getting this big PR.
I think one thing is when people are reluctant to share their story, to really get into it. We still see it a lot, where people don't want to share certain parts of their story because other people are involved, or because they don't have the confidence, they don't think that their story matters. Kind of what you were saying at the beginning, but everybody has a story that matters. And we have all had a different road to get where we are, and other people can learn from that, right? And that's why I encourage people to be honest about mistakes. I was speaking to a woman last week who's been an entrepreneur for about 20 years, and she's had bankruptcies and lost everything and started back up, and now has a 7-figure business. And I said, well, that's success. You've managed to not work for anybody else for 20 years, which was one of your goals. You've learned a lot of lessons about whom to trust and what to do right and what to do wrong. And you've been able to use those in your current company, right? But if she didn't share that story of loss and everything else, it wouldn't be as authentic for what she's doing now, which is she coaches and helps women who have online stores, because she's able to show them, here's what I did wrong, here's what I did right. Don't make those same mistakes, right? And I think that's one of the biggest things that also helps us relate to each other in a time when people are so fractured and divided. I've been up, where had budgets where, I was able to spend high 5 and 6 figures a year on charity. And I've also been on food stamps. I've been on every side, and they all make me who I am. And I have to be willing to share that so that people don't look and say, oh, she's successful because she had all this money or she had this or that. And I'm like, well, actually, no, that goes away. You know, who you have at the end of the day is, yourself. And so being able and willing to share that, and you can start small, and get into it. But the people that I find are least successful are the ones who are not willing to be authentic, are not willing to share their story. And also